The Somerton Man is one of the most baffling Australian mysteries that has stumped police, scientists, professional code breakers, and amateur sleuths for decades. His identity, his intentions, his cause of death have been unknown since the day his body was found on Somerton Beach in 1948. Until now. It was early morning on the 1st of December, 1948 at the Somerton Park Beach in South Australia. It was the first day of summer. A man dressed in a fine suit was sitting on the sand, resting against the seawall. Passers-by had assumed he had indulged in too many drinks the night before. However, he hadn't moved in some time, and upon closer inspection, it was clear he was dead. Police arrived on the scene and could not find a wallet or any form of identification. Police assumed the man had taken his own life and would soon be identified through a missing person report, but nobody came forward claiming to know the man. His face was printed in newspapers all around Australia, leading to many tips from the public about his identity, but police couldn't make any definitive matches. A couple who had been walking along the beach the previous night reported that they witnessed a man sitting in the same position and saw him raise his right arm almost like a wave before dropping it limply. The mystery only grew deeper after an autopsy was performed and his personal effects were discovered. The Somerton Man was believed to be 40 to 45 years old. He was well groomed and in good shape. He had soft hands and clean fingernails, which indicated he was not a labourer. He had unusually developed calf muscles as well as toes that were squeezed together in a wedge shape. These physical features led many to believe he was a professional ballet dancer. The man also had a genetic trait called hyperdontia, which means he was born missing some teeth. His specific case of hyperdontia was extremely rare though. He was missing his lateral incisors. A cause of death could not be determined and remains a mystery to this day. He had no cuts, bruises, or abrasions on his body. The autopsy revealed he had an abnormally large spleen. His stomach was congested with blood and it appeared he died of heart failure, but there was absolutely no indication of what brought it on. It was ruled that he had died of some kind of poisoning, even though no foreign substance other than food was detected in his body. His clothing was clean and dry and his shoes were immaculate, so he had not washed up on the beach, nor had he been walking in the sand. The tailoring of his suit and style of his tie were more common in the United States and had not yet become popular in Australia. He also did not have a hat, which was unusual for 1948. An unlit cigarette was found on his lapel. More bizarrely, all the tags and labels on his clothing had been removed. Even though a lot of people wore secondhand clothing due to World War II rationing, the discovery left police baffled. The items they found in the man's pockets led to only more questions. They found 2 unused rail and bus tickets, an aluminium comb that had been manufactured in the US, and a packet of juicy fruit gum, which at the time was also available in the US but not Australia. They also found an Army Club cigarette packet, which contained 7 cigarettes of a more expensive brand. This was highly unusual. At the time, people will often refill expensive cigarette packets with cheap cigarettes to appear more wealthy, but the Somerton Man had done the opposite. Was he perhaps trying to blend in rather than stand out? The man's suitcase was discovered at the Adelaide railway station, mostly containing items that were typical for travellers of that era, but no identification. The suitcase contained some waxed orange thread that had been used to repair the trousers that the man was wearing. This particular type of thread was common in America but was not yet available in Australia. All of the clothing in the suitcase also had their tags and labels removed, but 3 items that had been to a dry cleaner's had names written on them. T. Keane, Keane, written on a tie, Keane, Keane, written on a laundry bag, and Keane, Kean, on an undershirt. A search conducted that no T. Keane was missing in any English-speaking country. The Somerton Man's photo and fingerprints were sent all over the world, but nobody could work out who he was. Several months later, an inquest was ordered so the man's body could be re-examined. Again, a definitive case of death could not be determined. A plaster cast was made of the man's bust. His body was embalmed and buried in a dry plot of land to slow decomposition. But before his burial, a vital clue was found. Before we get into it, Don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this. A tiny piece of tightly rolled up paper was pulled out of the Somerton man's pocket with tweezers. Investigators unraveled it and printed on it were the words, "Tamam shud." It was a Persian phrase meaning "it is finished" or "the end." A local journalist realized that those were the final words of a book of classical Persian poetry titled Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. The search was now on for the specific book that the piece of paper was torn out of. A photograph of the words in its distinctive font were distributed through the newspapers. An unnamed man came forward and told police about how he had parked his car near the beach on November 30th, the day before the Somerton man's body was found. He had left the windows rolled down, which was not uncommon for the time, and when he returned, he had noticed a small book on the back seat. It was a match. Did the Somerton man toss his copy of the Rubaiyat into the man's car? Why didn't he dispose of it in a bin? Somerton man's copy of Rubaiyat was a fairly rare edition. The police found some curious and slightly creepy clues in this copy of the Rubaiyat. 2 phone numbers and what appeared to be a code. One phone number was for a local bank, and the other was for a woman named Jessica Jo Thompson. Jo Thompson was the first real lead police had. She worked as a nurse and lived just 400 meters or 1,300 feet from where the body was found. She told police she had no idea who the mystery man was or why her phone number would be in that book. Police took Jo Thompson to the Adelaide Museum to view the plaster cast of the Somerton man. She took one look at it and then immediately looked away. She was visibly shaken and seemed that she was going to faint. She reiterated that she had never seen the man before. The police questioned her further and she revealed that she was familiar with the Rubaiyat. In fact, she was a fan. She said she loved the poetry of Omar Khayyam so much that she even gifted a copy of the Rubaiyat to a soldier she met while working in Sydney during the war. His name was Alf Boxall. After the war, Jo Thompson moved to Melbourne, got married, and never heard from Alf Boxall again. Police tracked down Alf Boxall in Sydney and asked if he still had his copy of Rubaiyat. He showed the police his copy, with the final page and the words "Tamam shud" intact, along with an inscription written by Jo Thompson. Alf Boxall was not the Somerton man. Another strange clue was found in the back of the Somerton man's copy of Rubaiyat. Faint indentations depict a series of letters thought to be a code. Many experts and amateurs have attempted to crack the code for over 70 years, and even modern computer technology has been used. No meaning has ever been extracted from the letters, and Somerton experts have conceded that they are most likely not a code at all. The mystery of the Somerton man has gripped true crime enthusiasts for decades. There are 2 main theories about the man's identity. The first is that he was the biological father of Jo Thompson's son and travelled to Adelaide to see his child. The other theory is that the Somerton man and Jo Thompson were both spies, which, considering the social political state of the world at the time, wasn't too far-fetched. She raised Robin with her husband, Prosper Thompson, but in her later years confided that Robin was not Prosper's biological child. Robin Thompson grew up to become a professional ballet dancer. He also had a very rare genetic trait. He was born missing his lateral incisors. Leading Somerton researcher Professor Derek Abbott also found that the Somerton man and Robin Thompson both shared similar unique ear shapes. In yet another strange twist, Professor Derek Abbott ended up marrying Robin Thompson's daughter, Rachel Egan. For a long time, Professor Abbott's hypothesis that Rachel Egan was the Somerton man's granddaughter was considered to be the most plausible. It was thought that Somerton man was made aware of the birth of his son and made his way to Adelaide from America to meet him and possibly rekindle things with Jo Thompson. Perhaps Jo Thompson had rejected him, and the immense heartbreak of not being able to raise his own son led him to take his own life. The other popular theory was that Jo Thompson and Somerton man were both spies. In the 1940s, there was a large wave of European immigration into Australia, and Cold War paranoia and Red Scare were rampant. Historians have confirmed that there was spy activity in Adelaide at the time, particularly Russian spies. There were at least 2 sites close to Adelaide that were hubs for spy activity: the Radium Hill uranium mine and the Woomera Test Range, a British-Australian military research facility. In a 1978 interview, Alf Boxall revealed that he had worked intelligence when he met Jo Thompson in Sydney. In 2013, Joe Thompson's daughter, Kate, told the TV program 60 Minutes that her mother spoke Russian. Kate Thompson said she believed her mother knew the Somerton man and may have been a spy. The foreign poetry, the indecipherable code, the tags cut off the clothing, an unknown poison were all evidence that fueled speculation that the Somerton man was involved in espionage. Exactly 2 weeks after Somerton man's death, there was another strange death in Adelaide. A man named Tibor Kaldor appeared to have ingested a lethal poison and was found dead on December 13, 1948. Tibor Kaldor had known links to the Australian Communist Party. He had left a note, but investigators found the timing to be strange as Tibor Kaldor had received his naturalization papers a few months prior. In July 2022, Professor Derek Abbott announced that he had discovered the identity of the Somerton man. South Australia Police had exhumed Somerton man's body in 2021 to conduct DNA testing with modern technology, but did not allow Abbott to examine it. Although disappointed, Abbott did not lose hope. With the help of forensic genealogist Colleen Fitzpatrick, an independent DNA testing of the hairs that were stuck to the Somerton man's plaster bust led to a breakthrough. Abbott and Fitzpatrick constructed a genealogy tree of 4,000 people and found a young man in Melbourne who had a surprisingly close DNA match with Somerton man. This man's great-great-grandfather was Thomas Keane. The name Keane was written on items found in the Somerton man's suitcase. But Thomas Keane had death and funeral records, so he could not be the Somerton man. Thomas Keane had an extensive family tree and each person was looked into. There was one person who did not have a date of death: Thomas Keane's brother-in-law, Carl Charles Webb. Carl Webb was born on November 16, 1905 in Melbourne, Australia. He worked as an electrical engineer and instrument maker. He married pharmacist Dorothy Robinson in 1941 and lived in Melbourne. Carl Webb was passionate about poetry and wrote a lot of poetry themed around death. He certainly fit the profile of someone who would find Rubaiyat meaningful. He was also fond of betting on horse races, and the mysterious letters in the back of his copy of Rubaiyat may have simply stood for horse names. Dorothy filed for divorce in 1951 on the grounds of desertion. It is likely she never realized her husband was found dead in Adelaide. In the divorce papers, she described him as violent, threatening, moody, and didn't have many friends. She described an incident in 1946 where she found him in a confused state and very unwell. Contemporary researchers believe Carl Webb had attempted suicide by overdose. Carl and Dorothy separated in 1947, and there was evidence that Dorothy moved to South Australia. Could Carl have travelled down to win her back? There is also still no explanation for why Joe Thompson's phone number was written in Carl's copy of Rubaiyat. No link between them has been found yet other than they were both from Melbourne. Abbott and Fitzpatrick did further DNA testing with more living Webb family members to confirm the Somerton man's identity. The spy theory still remains popular and plausible even after the discovery of Somerton man's true identity. Tibor Kaldor, the man with communist links found dead 2 weeks after Somerton man, lived just 10 minutes away from Carl Webb in Melbourne. The two men's bodies were both found in the same area of Adelaide, over 700 kilometres or 435 miles away from home. Carl Webb's 1941 marriage certificate listed his address as a mansion in Melbourne owned by Tristan Buste, a major in military intelligence. At the time, there were other residents of the mansion with military links. In 1942, Carl and his wife moved to a flat not too far from the mansion. That same year, Signal's intelligence headquarters moved to a building directly behind the flat. There are still many unanswered questions in the case of the Somerton man. You can find many discussions online about the mystery, along with more details about all the clues that have been discovered. Early access to videos, discussions, polls, and behind-the-scenes blog posts are all on our Patreon. See you in the next video.